أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين واللعنة الدائم على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. For the love of our beloved Prophet and his beloved progeny, please recite a second loud salawat. For the hastening in the return of our beloved 12th Imam, please recite a third loud salawat. Last night we were discussing this idea, the concept of interaction between the genders and the concept of hijab. We posed 5 different questions and we said that inshallah, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala helps us, we are going to strive to provide answers to these 5 questions. The first discussion that we had was, where does Islam speak of this concept of hijab, especially regarding the 4 aspects of hijab that we mentioned yesterday. Allow me to go through those 4 aspects so that we can continue the discussion. From there, we said when we speak of this idea of hijab, we are talking about 4 things in particular. Number 1, which parts of the body need to be covered. Number 2, which ornaments are allowed to be displayed. Number 3, is makeup allowed to be applied or not. And number 4, is the way a woman walks and talks and behave. It has to be done in such a way that it does not attract the attention of the opposite gender. These were the 4 aspects that we spoke of, and we said we wanted to see where Islam speaks of these things. The first 3, brothers and sisters, we should already have a pretty good understanding of them. We went through them yesterday. When we went through this part of verse 31 from Surah An-Nur, the verse said, وَلَا يُبْدِينَ زِينَتَهُنَّ إِلَّا مَا ظَهَرَ مِنْهَا. With the help of hadith, we explained مَا ظَهَرَ مِنْهَا, what exactly is meant by that, and we went through the 2 different understandings that our marajih have in that regard. Let us continue with this verse and then see the other commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this regard. Recite salawat, please. When we continue, after the verse says, وَلْيَضْرِبْنَ بِخُمُرِهِنَّ عَلَى جُيُوبِهِنَّ, and we explained that part of the verse yesterday about this special way of hijab that's being done today, where a woman might cover her hair, for example, and her neck and her chest might be showing, the top of her chest might be showing. We explained that yesterday. Then the verse continues, and there are 12 groups that are mentioned. These 12 groups are exceptions when it comes to this ruling of hijab, meaning that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ordered the woman to have hijab except when in the presence of these 12 groups. And those 12 groups, there are certain points that we would like to go through. I don't think we'll have the time to go through them tonight. But at the end of the verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala again adds another very important command. And here, brothers and sisters, hopefully if I am successful tonight, I will try to walk you through the thought process of a faqih, of an alim, when he goes through this verse. How does he draw rulings from a verse like this? Why is this important, brothers and sisters? Because sometimes when we come across these rulings, we don't understand the thought process behind them. We feel like this marja, because he sat in the corner of Najaf, for example, his whole life, that's why he's giving this ruling. Because he never lived in a Western society, that's why he's so strict on these rulings. Sometimes that's what crosses our mind. But if we understand the thought process that this marja is going through to extract a ruling like this, then accepting these rulings will become somewhat easier for us, inshallah. When you go to the end of the verse, brothers and sisters, after the 12 groups are mentioned, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya Rasulullah, amongst the other things that you were supposed to go and tell the mu'minat, go and also tell them this. وَلَا يَضْرِبْنَ بِأَرْجُلِهِنَّ. Tell them that when they are walking, tell them not to stomp their feet. Tell them to walk normally. Why is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bringing this up? What's up with stomping the feet anyways? He says, لِيُعْلَمَ مَا يُخْفِينَ مِنْ زِينَتِهِنْ. Because when they do that, they let the men know, they draw the attention of the men to what? To the zinat that they are wearing. What is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaking of? You've never seen a sister who wants to draw attention to herself start stomping her feet. That's kind of weird today. What the Prophet and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are speaking about is this zina that the women used to wear back in the day. Sometimes they wear it today as well. Referred to the khalkhal, something that they used to wear on the ankle. When these people were walking, in order to draw attention to this zina of theirs, this woman would stomp her feet while she's walking. So this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, tell them to just walk normally. Tell them not to stomp their feet. Okay. When a marja comes to this part of the verse, brothers and sisters, you will find he will do a very special thing. He will take this idea of stomping the feet and he will generalize it. Meaning what? Meaning that he will say, yes, although Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he speaks of stomping the feet in particular, but he's not talking about stomping the feet in particular. He's talking about anything that's going to draw attention from the opposite gender. And that's a bold claim, brothers and sisters. A marja, when he makes a bold claim like that, he has to have proof. We have rulings, brothers and sisters, ahadith, that as much as someone that is speaking on behalf of Islam, as much as he cannot take something that is haram and make it halal, meaning that he cannot take the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and make it easier, he also cannot take the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and do what? And make it more difficult for people. You don't have the right to do that. Tahrim ma ahallallah, this is haram. So when an alim comes and takes this small ruling of stomping the feet and he generalizes it, he says if you wear a color that's going to attract the attention of the opposite gender, it's haram. He has to have proof for this. Give you another example. For example, the Quran says when you're speaking to your mother and your father, فَلَا تَقُلْ لَهُمَا uffin. Why is it that all of a sudden our ulama come and say, no, the Quran is not talking about uff in particular. It means anything that will disrespect your mother, for example. Anything that will disappoint your parents. How do they generalize rulings like this? A marja, an alim, anyone, they have to have proof when they are saying this is what God is saying. Recite a salawat, please. What you find here, brothers and sisters, is this, that the difference that we had here, where the marja will generalize the ruling, is this. Sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will mention a ruling, but He will not stop there. This is the beauty of the Quran, brothers and sisters. Sometimes He will mention a ruling, a command. He won't stop there. He will mention the reason for that command right afterwards. For example, we have hadith that wine is haram, but the hadith does not stop there. It doesn't say al-khamru haramun and that's it, the imam left. It says al-khamru haramun li'annahu muskir, because it intoxicates you. When they say it like that, you know that the problem with wine is not wine in and of itself. It's what? It's the idea that it does what? It intoxicates you. Here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَلَا يَضْرِبْنَ بِأَرْجُلِهِنَّ. Did He stop there? No. لِيُعْلَمَ مَا يُخْفِينَ. Because when you do that, you draw attention to yourself. The reasoning that comes behind the command, that shows us that what matters for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is what? Is that reasoning. This is why a marja will sit there. He will say, yes, this stomping the feet, this is just one example. Today, it might be other examples. Anything that you do to draw attention to yourself, this is going to be considered haram. Recite salawat, please. Again, you will find the same thing when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is referring to the wives of the prophets. And I made this point the other day, that the verses that we have regarding hijab are not particularly for the wives of the prophet, because the verse that speaks about hijab starts with what? وَقُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنَاتِ. But I'm just going through this verse. This particular verse is for the wives of the prophet. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya nisa an-nabi, O wives of the prophet, لَسْتُنَّ كَأَحَدٍ مِنَ النِّسَاءِ. Don't think that you guys are just like any other random woman. إِنِ اتَّقَيْتُنَّ. if you have taqwa. No, your taqwa is much more important than the taqwa of any other woman because you're the wife of the prophets. Okay. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says this, فَلَا تَخْذَعْنَ بِالْقَوْلِ. When you're speaking, don't make your voice soft. He does not stop there. He mentions the reasoning afterwards. So you understand that what matters for him is that reasoning. He says, فَلَا تَخْذَعْنَ بِالْقَوْلِ فَيَطْمَعَ الَّذِي فِي قَلْبِهِ مَرَضٍ. So that the one who's sick, the one who has a disease in his heart, he does not feel emboldened. He does not feel encouraged to make advances towards you. So you understand, anything that will make a man feel emboldened, that is going to be haram because the reasoning has been mentioned afterwards. Okay. Now that we understand the proof for these four aspects that we had in hijab, brothers and sisters, you will see that hijab is a very magnificent ruling of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why is that? Hijab, brothers and sisters, is a mixture of two types of rulings. In Islam, we have two types of different rulings. People mix these up with one another and then they have misunderstandings. We have the type of rulings that don't change based on time and place. They don't play out differently based on time and place. If you're praying Fajr on the roof of the White House, you're going to pray 2 rakats. If you pray it here in Michigan, you're going to pray 2 rakats. If you're going to pray during the time of the Prophet, you're going to pray 2 rakats. You're going to pray now, you're going to pray 2 rakats. Okay. But then we have some rulings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Pay attention, please, brothers and sisters. These rulings do not change. They play out differently based on time and place. There's a reason why I'm emphasizing that. The ruling does not change. The ruling is worded in such a way that it plays out differently based on time and place. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says you have to respect your parents. You have to show them your appreciation, show them your affection. Back in the day, you would go to their house. Today, for example, if you're living further away, you might call them. It plays out differently based on time and place. Music, the music that was haram during the time of the Prophet might as well be halal today because that music is not the type of music they use in haram gatherings. If you play that type of music in haram gatherings today, people will think you're weird. So we're having a party, this guy is here with a tablet, I don't know, this kind of stuff. So you see some rulings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they play out differently over time and place. Now, with hijab, brothers and sisters, the first 3 aspects that we mention, which parts have to be covered, which ornaments you are allowed to display, and the fact that you're not allowed to have makeup, these do not change over time and place. But the 4th one does change over time and place. If you remember, the first day we started this topic, we brought up a very important question. We said, why is it that when I go from a Muslim country to a non-Muslim country, or a non-Muslim country to a Muslim country, some parts of my hijab changes? Because some parts of hijab play out differently based on time and based on place. Other aspects of it, you cannot change. And that's because of the wording Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has used for each one of these aspects. Hopefully that's clear, inshallah. Recite salawat, please. All right, a little bit more of explanation about this idea that a woman is not allowed to walk or talk or behave. And don't worry, I will defend the sisters pretty soon, inshallah. But bear with me. That a woman is not allowed to walk or talk or behave in such a way that provokes haram in the opposite gender. Allow me to explain this just so we understand the principle, and then we'll move on to some of the other points. Brothers and sisters, sometimes when we speak of provoking haram, you know what comes to our mind? The worst case scenario comes to our mind. What's the worst case scenario? That I walk or talk or behave in such a way that it provokes haram in the opposite gender and it leads to, for example, God forbid, a haram relationship. Sometimes that's what people think we're talking about when we say provoking haram. Brothers and sisters, that's the worst case scenario. When we speak of provoking haram, brothers and sisters, sometimes provoking haram is done by someone doing something that causes the opposite gender to look at them in the wrong way, with the wrong intention, with lust. This is provoking haram. When Islam speaks of provoking haram, it's not talking about you acting in such a way that when you leave the house, people faint behind you when you're walking. No, that's not what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about this. That you act in such a way that it provokes a haram look in the opposite gender. This is acting in a haram way, in a haram fashion. This idea, sometimes you will ask a sister, for example, they will say, Sheikhana, all of these rules and regulations that you keep talking about, I don't pay attention to all these rules and regulations, but I am so modest, I have never been part of any haram relationship. In fact, if anyone dares suggest such a thing to me, I will be the one to reject them and push them back. To that sister, I will say, that's great, that's wonderful. But what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants is more than that. What Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from you is for your attitude, your behavior to be in such a way. Not only does it not provoke a haram relationship, that's easy. Not provoking haram looks. This is what we mean by not provoking haram in the opposite gender. Recite salawat, please. Having said that, brothers and sisters, let us move on to the fifth question that we had brought up on the first day. Fifth question was this: why is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala burdened the woman to act in such a way that she does not provoke haram in the opposite gender? Because the opposite gender does not have self-control. This is a very important point, especially our sisters need to understand. Okay. The first point, there's 2 points that we need to keep in mind here. The first point is this, brothers and sisters. There is a difference between what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is doing and burdening the women for the opposite gender. What do I mean by that? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has simply asked a woman not to take an active part in provoking the opposite gender. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never holds the woman accountable because there are some sick men out there. He doesn't do that. The only thing He is asking is what? You want to live in this society? There are sick men? That's fine. Just go about your life normally. You shouldn't take an active part in provoking haram. If you're not taking active part in provoking haram, and there are some sick men, as there will always be, a sick man looks at a woman with the wrong intentions, you think Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to stop the world all of a sudden? And say, oh no, someone looked with the wrong intention. We shouldn't have a society. Women should go and stay behind curtains upon curtains. Is this how Islam dealt with things? No. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I just hope there's not a misunderstanding here, especially with the sisters. Pay attention, please. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, you do not take a proactive part in provoking haram. The rest you leave on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The problem is, many times you will find that this person, the way they're talking, walking, behaving, the makeup that they're applying, they are provoking haram. Otherwise, if a woman does not provoke haram, she's doing her normal day-to-day issues, is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gonna come and say, no, there are some sick men out there who do not have self-control. Never leave the house. Is this what Islam has said? No, when you look at Islam, you find some parts of Islam, you find there is even a chance of this happening. Still, Islam has commanded the woman that you are not allowed to cover your face. In some parts of Ihram, when you go for Hajj, you're not allowed to cover your face. There are men, women walking beside one another. You're not allowed to cover your face. In fact, during the time of the fifth Imam, he was part of Hajj. He was going, one of the women took her, the hand fans that they had back in the day. She took her hand fan to cover her face. The Imam told her, you have to move that. You can't cover your face. Of course, over there's a particular reason for it. It doesn't have to do with genders and things of that nature. But my point is, you will see, someone will say, oh, someone might look with the wrong intention. You know what the Imam will say? The Imam will say, as long as she's not provoking haram, she is doing everything the right way. Her hijab is the proper way. The way she's walking, talking, behaving is the proper way. Then if a sick man has a sick intention, that's his fault. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to hold him accountable. So this is the first point that we need to understand. There have been multiple incidents, brothers and sisters, where a person would come, look with the wrong intentions in the presence of our imams, in the presence of our prophets sometimes. The Prophet would not sit there and say, sister, why did you leave your house? You know sick men are always out there. No, because she was not provoking haram. She was going about her business. She was doing everything the right way. Now this man is looking with the wrong intentions. Well, he's sick. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not going to tell the whole society to stay in home because there are a minority of men who are sick. This happened during the time of the Prophet. The Prophet, he was in his last Hajj. Well, we should say the first and his last Hajj, which turned out to be both. In Hajjatul Wada, one of the things that the Prophet was doing often, he was holding Q&A sessions in the sense that people had questions about the manasik of Hajj. This was the first and last time that the Prophet was doing Hajj with all of these Muslims. They had questions about the detailed rulings of Hajj. In one of these instances, one of the women comes to the Prophet, starts asking him a question. And as the Prophet is answering this question, there's a young man by the name of Fudayl ibn Abbas behind the Prophet. And the Prophet sees, as he's answering this question, all of a sudden, this woman and this young man, they're not really interested in finding the answer to their question anymore. Right? They're looking at each other with the wrong intention. Did the Prophet, brothers and sisters, stand there and say, sister, you know there are sick men out there. Why did you leave your house? Did he burden the woman? No, because the woman was not provoking haram. Her hijab was proper. She did not have makeup on. She didn't have any of that stuff. What did she do? The Prophet turned towards Fudayl ibn Abbas, who was standing behind him. He turned his face. He said, a young woman, a young man, I'm afraid the third one is going to be shaitan amongst you. Recite a salawat, please. So this is the first point that we need to understand, brothers and sisters. This is black and white in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you are provoking haram, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala definitely has a problem with it. If it's makeup, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala definitely has a problem with it. If it's the way I'm walking or talking or behaving that's attracting the opposite gender, it definitely has a problem with it. But if that's not the case, then you go about your life normally. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not going to burden the women because there are some men who will look with the wrong intentions. Number one. Number two, brothers and sisters, this idea, unfortunately, our cultures have taught us this. This idea that you are not supposed to provoke haram because you are a woman. This is wrong, brothers and sisters. The idea that you are not supposed to provoke haram has to do with women just as much it has to do with men. And I'll explain what I mean by that. Our cultures have taught us, unfortunately, that if something is provoking haram, it must have been this sister, for example. No, men have ways of provoking haram as well. You don't believe me? Inshallah, you can ask them at night when you go home. Provoking haram is done by men as well. There's just one major difference. When it comes to sisters, women, usually they will provoke haram by drawing attention to themselves. For the men, sometimes they will do that by what? Granting attention to someone. Sometimes a couple of glances. Sometimes the idea that, oh, I see you there sitting there. This attention that you are granting, this provokes haram. You look at these interactions that take place between the two genders. Who initiates a lot of them? A lot of them start by a brother acknowledging the presence of this person, acknowledging the beauty that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed this person with, for example. Well, this is provoking haram. So provoking haram is not something that only has to do with this side of the curtain. No, it has to do with this side of the curtain as well. Recite a salawat, please. So hopefully we understand this, brothers and sisters. Just like a family of four, where you have the mother and the father and you have a boy and a girl. Sometimes when the boy is frustrated, the mother will tell the daughter, don't provoke him today. You don't have to help. Just don't provoke him today. The other day, the daughter is a little frustrated. The mother turns to the boy and says, don't provoke her today. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has asked us to do. He has not burdened either gender for the credits and for the sake of the other gender. With that, inshallah, let me add this last point that we will have, inshallah, and then we will end. Another thing that we find, brothers and sisters, that's becoming very prevalent unfortunately, it's making its way into our communities, and we'll end with this, inshallah, is this idea that sometimes when you tell women that you have to be careful, you have to watch out, there are sick men out there, instead of understanding that you are trying to take care of them, you are trying to protect them, they will call it victim blaming. This is something that's becoming very prevalent, and it's coming to us from the non-Muslim culture that we have here. It's an incident that happened just a couple months ago, 3 or 4 months ago in India. Some of you might have heard of it. What happened? A young woman was leaving her workplace late at night. She was driving home. 2 other men are following her. She calls the police. The police comes and arrests these men. This happened in India. And when they arrest the men, they find out that yes, these men were trying to harass her and were trying to wait until she gets out of the car and harass her. So this lady, she goes home. She puts it on a Facebook post that yes, she thanks the police, that thank you so much, you guys came, you saved my life. You know, if it wasn't for you, these men would have harassed me, they would have bothered me. A couple days passes by, one of the politicians, he says that woman should have been careful and not have left her workplace so late at night. Meaning what? Meaning that this is happening because it's your fault. You are not protecting yourself. You are not watching out for yourself. Okay, now I'm not here to defend some politician that I don't even know. My point is this, brothers and sisters. What was the reaction of the women in this regard? Oh, they took this as victim blaming. So you're not going to hold that man accountable? You're going to blame the victim here? They took to Twitter. You can go search this on Twitter. They went on Twitter, yes. No, they started posting pictures. I'm a woman. It's 12 o'clock midnight. I'm here in the middle of the night. No one can tell me what to do and what not to do. These women could not understand the difference between victim blaming and protecting someone who is vulnerable and might become a victim. A woman is vulnerable a little bit more compared to men. A woman needs to be protected. She needs to be a little bit more careful. These women took to Twitter to say that no, these men cannot tell us anything. Instead of victim blaming, go and hold these men accountable for what they were doing. This, brothers and sisters, is creeping into our communities as well sometimes. Where you see a sister, if a father asks him, please be careful. Baba, you shouldn't hold me accountable. You should hold that man accountable. Of course you should hold that man accountable. But because you hold him accountable doesn't mean you shouldn't be smart. They started a hashtag, I ain't no Cinderella and stuff like that. Like, you can't tell me what to do and what not to do. No one is telling you what to do and what not to do in the sense that they're blaming you for the problems. No. Islam, brothers and sisters, has 2 approaches. At the same time that it holds the man accountable, at the same time it tells the women that you have to be careful. This is something that the Prophet dealt with during his time. The munafiqeen would come out during the night, and the women who were walking around, and the women did not have hijab in the proper way, these men would harass these women. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed the verses that whoever bothers these mu'mineen and mu'minat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to punish them. He said that if these munafiqeen don't stop what they're doing, لَنُغْرِيَنَّكَ بِهِمْ, we will tell you to take action against them, to attack them, to uproot them from Medina. That's the first approach. He holds the transgressor accountable. But at the same time, he also said, go and tell these mu'mineen and mu'minat to pull upon themselves their jalabib. Tell the mu'mineen and mu'minat to be careful. يُدْنِينَ عَلَيْهِنَّ مِنْ جَلَابِبِهِنَّ. So this is a very important point to understand, brothers and sisters. When we ask, or when Islam asks a sister, be careful, it's not about victim blaming. No, that person who is doing the transgression also has to be held accountable. At the same time, a sister has to be careful. She has to be smart in terms of when she's coming, when she's going, so that she can protect herself. And sometimes, of course, with Detroit, even the men have to be careful with some of the violence that we hear is going on around here. With that, inshallah, we'll bring tonight's talk to an end. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that hopefully what was said during these nights was of benefit to the speaker and the audience as well, inshallah. Let us send our salams to the plains of Karbala. Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah wa ala al-arwah allati hallat bifina'ik. عليك مني جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين ورحمة الله وبركاته.